Good afternoon, booktube. Hope everyone's well. Welcome to my channel, Raina Read Stuff. I am Debs. Um, just gonna run through my reading week. Been quite a busy week. I did a video Friday on Shortyseptember and all the short books that I've read so far. Well, all the books I read last week for Shortyseptember. Um, I've got quite a lot coming up in the next couple of days. I'm planning to do a fair few videos, sorry, um, because there are a lot of events finishing. Can't believe this time next week it's going to be October. So there are a lot of good events finishing next week, and there are a lot of good events starting next Sunday. So I'm going to plan on doing a couple of those. These books that I'm going to talk to you about today, and there are five of them. Some of them are for some of the September events, and a couple of them aren't. I'm going to start with an event called Strayaseptember, which was the brainchild of gunpowder fiction and plot. And it's about reading Australian authors, and I've really been enjoying this. This week's book, I read Tony Birch's The White Girl. As you can see, I read it in an E format. I'm getting a bit more used to that now. I do still prefer physical format, but I am getting quite used to reading on my iPad now, which opens up a wealth of different options. Anyway, Tony Birch is The White Girl. Tony Birch is an Indigenous author, and that was one of the prompts for Strayaseptember. The White Girl is set in the 1960s, and it tells the story of Odette, who is an elderly Aboriginal woman who is bringing up her daughter, her granddaughter, Sissy or Cicely, um, and has been ever since she was a baby. Odette's daughter, Lila, is the mother of Sissy, but disappeared when Sissy was a baby. Odette did try to find her and failed, um, and has since been bringing up her granddaughter. And they live in an Aboriginal part of town, well, outside town, the other side of the rail tracks. And they're reasonably happy. They are subject to the restrictions that the Australian government put on them at the time. But they have a completely useless and very drunk policeman in their town who is in charge of the police, and he's pretty useless. And so everybody just sort of drifts by, getting on with their own business. And then he's fired, and a new guy comes into town to take control of the police department and starts taking a very, very close look at the young Indigenous children. And this is set against a time when the government decided in its infinite wisdom that the best thing to do with Indigenous children was to take them away from their families and their parents and bring them up in they're not orphanages because the kids have parents, but they are church-run institutions where they are indoctrinated. They're not allowed to see their relatives. They're taught things that white folk think they ought to know. Their religions and their beliefs are ignored. And they are destined for a life in service, basically. Odette is absolutely adamant that this is not going to happen to her daughter. But this new police officer starts taking a very close look, and Sissy is very pale skinned. In fact, she could probably pass for a white person. And this is likely to be because her father would have been white. But Odette has no idea who Sissy's father is. And she hasn't heard from her daughter for years, years and years. This is the story of how oppressed, still not that long ago, the Indigenous people of Australia were, and it's written really well. Odette is an amazing character. She is mentally strong. She knows what her roots are. She wants her granddaughter to hold on to those roots and be able to hold on to family. And I think this book is about family, it's about oppression, it's about fighting back, um, not violently, but fighting back. And it's about ensuring you get the very best deal for your family members and you protect them as much as you can. And it's lovely. I really enjoyed it. So thank you for the recommendation because it was fabulous. Now, the next book I read, I think I said last week I'd read The Magician's Nephew. Next up was The Lion and the Witch in the Wardrobe. There is some controversy about which order you should read these in. I personally choose to read them in the order of the story rather than the order in which they were published. So I believe this was the first one to be published, and everybody knows the story of the Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, don't they? There's no really real need to run through it. What I do like in this book is the dedication in the front of it, and it's dedicated to C.S. Lewis's goddaughter, Lucy Barfield, and it says this: I wrote this story for you, but when I began it, I hadn't realised girls grow quicker than books, and as a result, you're already too old for fairy tales. And by the time it's printed and bound, you'll be older still. But someday, you'll be old enough to start reading fairy tales again, and you can take it down from some upper shelf, dust it off, and tell me what you think of it. And that sort of sums up how I feel about children's books. I read a lot of children's books when I was a child, and now I feel I'm old enough to read them again. And this isn't my favourite of the Narnia books. I think it's been done so many times. I know it too well. Uh, but I'm glad I read it because I've decided I'm reading them in order. I've got a box set of them, and I really need to get them off the shelves and up on top of the shelves, so I've got more space on the main shelf. Now, one of the other things I'm taking apart in this month is Shaketember. I read Richard III, which I really enjoyed, but I was struggling with Romeo and Juliet. I don't know why. Just wasn't into it, really. And then I picked up, well, I've been reading this, Shakespeare's Restless World, by Neil MacGregor, for Q3 of Historathon. And again, I'll put all the links for Shaketember and Historathon down below. I found this helped me finish Romeo and Juliet. So going backwards, this one takes 20 different historical objects from the Tudor times, and it discusses them with reference to Shakespeare. And one of the things, I mean, there's lots of things in here. Now, where's the index? We've got a ship in a bottle. We've got a play, a copy of a play. We've got the collected works of Shakespeare, the first edition, which actually Shakespeare didn't publish two of his friends did after his death. Um, we have a sword. And there's various different things that are discussed. Oh, there's also a little pot that somebody's eye got put into after it was hauled out of his head when he was hung, drawn, and quartered. Some of them are a bit gross. But interspersed through all of these, it references Shakespeare's plays. And one of the things that it said in there was that Romeo and Juliet contains the only real reference to the plague in Shakespearean plays, which is reasonably strange considering Shakespeare's life in its entirety. There were several major outbreaks of the plague. Um, but it's in a bit in Romeo and Juliet where the priest has sent a letter to Romeo telling him about the plans for Juliet avoiding the marriage to the prince, count, and the message isn't delivered because the messenger is shut into a house because they think the plague is in that house. And so he can't get out to deliver the message to Romeo. Anyway, reading this helped me understand and enjoy Romeo and Juliet more. And even though I still wasn't keen on the first part, the first part is basically young blokes running around being ridiculous and beating each other up. I don't suppose much has changed. But also, this priest. I mean, who lets a 14-year-old girl marry a guy that she met the day before? That's not okay. Most of this tragedy is the priest's fault. I blame the priest. But I did enjoy the second half of the book, of the play, much more, and I'm really glad that actually I managed to finish it, and it's thanks to this book that I did. Now, getting back to this book, it's really interesting the way MacGregor describes Tudor times around these objects, and I loved the way that Shakespeare plays were introduced into each of the chapters. There's 20 chapters, one for each different object. The other thing I like about this book is that there's a bit at the back which tells you where all of these objects are. And one of the objects was a wooden case that looks as though it's a peddler's trunk and it's got bits of material in there. But when you put all the bits of material together, it actually becomes a Catholic priest kit. So when Catholicism was banned and priests had to hide, there's some guy carrying this wooden case around from stately home to stately home or village to village. And in there, he's got all his clothing and all the props, for want of a better word, he needs to conduct a Catholic mass. I thought that was fascinating. But yeah, it tells you where all of these things are now. Some are in the British Museum, a couple in the National Museum of Scotland, Westminster Abbey. It's then got a pretty extensive bibliography, which I always like, and then a references and notes section, which I also like. So that was really good, and thanks to this, Romeo and Juliet was also good. Now the last one is one I read just because I wanted to, and I bought it in a second-hand shop because I want to read more literature from all around the world. And Ali and Nino, I think it's Nino rather than Nino because there's no thing over the top of it, by Kurban Syed, It's set in Azerbaijan, and I couldn't think of any author at all, not one from Azerbaijan. So I picked this up. It turns out there's a bit of a mystery about Kurban Said. This book was first published in the 1930s, and it was published in Vienna. And initially, people thought that Kurban Said was a pseudonym for Baroness Alfreda Ehrenfels, who was an Austrian countess, and she was the person who signed the publication documents for it. But it's about Baku, the capital of Azerbaijan, pre-First World War. And people thought it was a bit strange that this Austrian countess might have written it. Anyway, the current thinking is that the author was actually an Azerbaijani Jew called Lev Nussimbaum. He was born in Baku in 1905, and quite as a young man he converted to the Muslim faith and became known then not by the name Kurban. I can't find the name that he was then known as. Anyway, he was forced out of Azerbaijan by the Russian Revolution, and he went to Berlin, where in the 1920s, late 1920s, he was quite well known among the literary sect there. Sect's not the right word anyway, even if I am trying to say sex, neither of those are the right word. Anyway, you know what I mean. Unfortunately, he was then forced out of Germany when the Nazis started to take power, and he went to Austria, which after a couple of years it wasn't really safe to be there either. He ended up in Italy, where he died of a blood disease under house arrest in Positano in 1942. So, back to the book itself. It's set in pre-First World War Baku. And at the time, Azerbaijan is it's a mixing pot. It's a melting pot of cultures. And it doesn't know whether it is a Muslim country or whether it is a European Christian country. Our hero, Ali, falls in love with Nino when she's quite young. She's a year younger than him. And this is their love story, but it's also a love story between Ali and his religion and Ali and his country. And Nino is European, she's Georgian, and she is a Greek Orthodox Christian. Ali is a Shiite Muslim, and he makes the distinction between that and the Sunni Muslim quite clearly. He loves Nino. He doesn't want to have. He's allowed up to 4 wives under his religion. He doesn't want to have those. He wants to have one wife. He wants no harem. He doesn't want Nino to take the veil. They are perfectly happy together. But then the First World War gets a bit close for comfort, and they escape from Baku. They try living in Iran, where Nino isn't allowed out of the house. She can't speak to anybody. She is really very secluded as a Muslim wife. But eventually the call of their homeland becomes too strong, and they return to Baku to try and defend it. Now, what I liked the most about this book was the tiny little details about religion and about what people were wearing and about what they had to eat and how they cooked it and how different life was in each of the places that they went to. But fundamentally, this is a three-way love story between Ali and his wife, Ali and his religion, and Ali and his country. And it's beautiful. It is just so lovely. I am so glad I found it. Just a random pickup in a charity shop. That one's definitely going on my around the world board, which I'll probably do a video on next week. But it was so good, so good. So that's what I've read this week. I'm really pleased with it actually because I want to get through those C.S. Lewis books again so I can put them up on the top shelf, clear a bit of space on that shelf. But I loved that inscription that it almost gave me permission to read. Not that I need permission to read children's books, but I love children's books and I shall continue to read them. I was pleased to get through Romeo and Juliet because I really wasn't enjoying it, and now I think I can say that I did. The White Girl was a beautiful piece of writing and a very poignant piece of writing as well. So I'm delighted that that was recommended. And the 20 Shakespearean Objects was brilliant. So yeah, it's been a good week all round, really. I hope you've had a good week and a great weekend. Um, we're coming up to Monday, so enjoy the week ahead. Thank you for stopping by. Please like and subscribe. That would be amazing. Cheer me up no end. And I shall speak to you probably more often than not this week, if you're willing to listen. So have a good time and read lots, and I'll speak to you again soon.